One slight touch, and the ocean's most feared predator goes completely still. No struggle, no escape, just nothing. You might have heard about it before. It's called tonic immobility, a phenomenon so bizarre that it's often been referred to as nature's off switch for sharks. For years, scientists have speculated on its purpose, but what if we've been completely wrong about what's really happening? Well, new research has surfaced that might just shatter everything we thought we knew about this strange behavior. So join me today as we go in depth into the evolution of tonic immobility in sharks. We'll have a look at the existing hypotheses with some real world examples, and then a bit later on, we'll dive into this brand new research paper that might just end all of this speculation for good. Welcome back to another Shark Bites episode, everyone. Now, tonic immobility isn't just an odd behavior that we see in sharks, it's actually seen across the animal kingdom. It's been observed in fish, reptiles, birds, insects, and even mammals. Another term that refers to tonic immobility would be thanatosis, named after the Greek mythology figure who personified death. Now you know where old Clicky Fingers got his name from. Sometimes it has been referred to as playing dead, although technically they're not quite the same thing, but more on that in a minute. Over in the States, probably the most common example you'll have seen of tonic immobility in another animal is the opossum. This small nocturnal marsupial, when startled or approached by a predator, will involuntarily enter a state of paralysis. They'll curl onto the floor with their eyes and mouth open, often with their tongue hanging out, and will even secrete a foul-smelling substance from their anal glands. Basically, they appear as if they were dead. The key difference here, though, between the opossum's tonic immobility and playing dead or feigning death is the fact that this is involuntary. With tonic immobility, the animal has no choice as to whether it enters that state. It just happens automatically to it, involuntarily. This is a little bit different to other animals that play dead who have active control over it. I think the best example that I could probably think of is hedgehogs here in the UK, who, when approached, will curl up into a tight ball and their spiny body deters any predators from eating them. But that right there is an active choice from the hedgehog. It's not something that automatically happens to it, which is the case for tonic immobility. Now, because it's relatively widespread across the animal kingdom, it would suggest that it's been evolutionarily conserved because in some scenarios, it works. If you're an animal that enters that state and you survive, it's given you an advantage over another animal that didn't. And even if that advantage was only really marginal, natural selection will still favor that behavior. In sharks, though, tonic immobility is a little bit confusing to say the least, because as it stands in the scientific community, we don't really fully understand it. And it's made even more confusing by the fact that it's been documented in some sharks, but not others. Sometimes in shark species that are even in the same order. Take the erectolobiforms, aka the carpet sharks. The nurse shark and the epaulet shark are both related to each other in this order, although epaulets don't have tonic immobility, but nurse sharks do. As it stands, there's verifiable tonic immobility data in the literature for at least 35 elasmobranch species, but the genus that it's most commonly been observed in is the carchariniforms. This is the largest order of sharks with over 270 species and includes sharks like your requiem sharks, your cat sharks, or your ground sharks. And when you're watching it happen, it's a pretty odd thing to witness. More often than not, I imagine you'll have seen this when scuba divers have grabbed sharks on the end of the snout, rubbed it, and then flipped them upside down. And this right here is what we refer to in the scientific community as stupid. There's a time and a place for inducing tonic immobility, namely when we're trying to get a shark in a stable state so that we can safely measure or tag it for research purposes. But putting a shark in tonic because we can is never going to be a valid reason for doing it. Oh, guys, you've got me whinging again. Anyway, flipping a shark upside down or rubbing its snout isn't the only way these animals end up in this trance-like state. There's other occasions where you'll see sharks induce each other or put themselves into tonic immobility, and that's even stranger to witness. Take this zebra shark here, for example, swimming along happy as Larry, and bang, out of nowhere it's out like a light. Its fins cease to work and it just sinks to the bottom. We're going to come back to this one in a second. There's also this clip here that is still to this day spreading around, purporting to be tonic immobility in this white shark. Long-term viewers of the channel will know that I've spoken about this one before, and it's something called repetitive aerial gaping, or RAG, not tonic immobility. This is a frustration response from that particular white shark that's thought to reduce intraspecies aggression between individuals. Now, because tonic immobility is seen in some sharks but not others, it's meant that scientists have been speculating on its function for years and years. And you know us, we're real good at speculating. When we think of behavioral traits and their evolution within animals, we often go down the line of thinking that every trait in nature is adaptive, as in it has to provide some kind of benefit to the organism, which is why it then gets selected for via natural selection. Historically, then, there are three main hypotheses for tonic immobility within sharks, and we're going to have a look at all three of them. First up, then, we've got the anti-predator strategy, like we saw in the opossum example I gave you at the start of the video. This one suggests, then, that tonic immobility might have evolved in the exact same way in sharks. By freezing and playing dead, you might have a better chance at surviving and not being eaten by a predator. You could say that maybe this zebra shark clip that we watched earlier falls under this category. So you've got the two freedivers here, either side of that zebra shark, the one filming and then the one behind the shark. It's It's been spooked, feels a bit trapped, and bang, it's gone into that tonic state pretending to be dead and sinks to the sea floor. But despite that video appearing to support this first hypothesis, there isn't actually any really strong evidence for it, or at least evidence that is compelling enough to discount the other reasons. And there's even a couple of retorts that would argue against it. Take the predator-prey relationship between killer whales and white sharks, for example. The killer whales actually use tonic immobility to their advantage when they're hunting sharks, because a decent-sized white shark, even if injured, could still give a nasty bite to a killer whale. So these killer whales exploit the tonic immobility in the sharks, flipping them upside down so they don't pose any threat to them. And that's when they basically surgically remove the livers of the sharks and discard the rest. Yep, it's as messed up as it sounds. I've covered the killer whale white shark stuff quite a lot on the channel, so you can check it out via that link in the top right, and I'll post it in the description as well. If we remove the killer whale shark dynamic for a second, because it's not a particularly common interaction, sharks, a lot of the time, are the apex predator in their environment. So they rarely have a predator to be afraid of that would require the use of tonic immobility to deter them. Sure, maybe some of the smaller shark species might use it against a bigger shark or a marine mammal, but whacking great 5-meter long tiger sharks are documented to go into tonic, so the anti-predator strategy doesn't really hold true for all shark species. And that brings us to our next hypothesis then, mating. It's long been speculated that tonic immobility plays some kind of reproductive role in sharks, and it kind of makes sense because there are tons of video examples of mating sharks that have ended up in that trance-like state. I think one of the best examples is this video here. Watch as this male nurse shark approaches that female, bites down on her right pectoral fin, and flips her over on her side. She's now entered that state of tonic immobility, her fins have basically stopped working and she starts to sink. Fortunately for her though, this male is a bit of a boop and he can't quite finish the deed before she snaps out of it and swims off. So what we're seeing there is the male flip the female just before he's about to mate with her, so it's not too much of a stretch to think that tonic immobility could be playing some kind of a role during mating. Perhaps it might help reduce struggling and makes the whole copulation process just that much easier. The line of thinking here makes sense until you look at the data, because most research indicates that tonic immobility typically doesn't differ between the sexes. For example, in nurse sharks, both males and females can be induced into tonic. And so if it evolved to play an important role during mating, then generally you'd only be seeing it in the females and not the males, but that isn't the case. And so we move on to our third hypothesis, sensory overload. This one here would be a sort of shutdown response during moments of extreme stimulation. Take the scuba divers rubbing the sharks on the snout. That part of their body is the most sensitive area, lined with thousands of ampullae of Lorenzini, the electrosensory organs. And if you rub that area, that right there is some extreme stimulation, of which some sharks just can't hack it, so they're just shut down. But again, to date, that sensory overload hypothesis hasn't been scientifically tested or verified across different shark species. Now, if we were hedging our bets on this, I'd say there's a half chance here that it could be all three of these hypotheses working in tandem. Perhaps tonic immobility is a multifunctional adaptation that depends on the shark species itself, the ecological niche it's in, or the habitat in which it lives. But there's a couple of scientists out there who have proposed a different hypothesis, one that basically throws all the other ones into the bin. Dr. Jodie Rummer and PhD student Joel Gayford recently released their own brand new tonic immobility research a few months back. In it, they tested 13 different species of sharks, rays, and chimera to see whether they entered tonic immobility when gently flipped upside down. 7 of those 13 sharks did, and 6 didn't. But after they got that data back, they decided to map the behavior backwards across hundreds of millions of years of shark family history. And the results from their dataset didn't support any of the 3 existing hypotheses that we've just spoken about, so they decided to come up with their own. By doing their evolutionary analysis, they found that over those millions of years, tonic immobility was actually lost independently at least 5 times across different shark groups. This awesome little phylogenies figure shows that, I think, quite nicely, especially with the example that I gave you earlier between nurse sharks and epaulet sharks. Here you can see the epaulet shark, Hemicylium ocellatum, and then just below it here you've got the nurse shark, Ginglimostoma serratum. The nurse shark here is shown in blue, which means it has tonic immobility, and then the epaulet shark is in red, meaning it doesn't. If we go back in time here to the Cretaceous period, we can see that at this point in time, the common ancestor of these 2 sharks likely had tonic immobility, although there was a small chance that it didn't, but for some reason when they diverged, it was lost in epaulets but retained in nurse sharks. And so it was this evolutionary analysis that led Gayford and Rummer to propose that tonic immobility in sharks was an ancestral trait that was likely present in all ancient sharks, rays, and chimeras, but then as time went on and these species evolved and diverged, many of them lost the behavior. The question here though is why? Why would some sharks lose it and others keep it? Well, in certain situations or environments, going into tonic and freezing might actually be a pretty bad idea. Take some small shark species that live on reefs, like the epaulet shark. These little guys often squeeze through tight gaps and crevices in coral habitats to feed or to rest. And so going completely limp in these situations could get them stuck or killed, which means that in these lineages of sharks, losing the tonic immobility behavior might have been advantageous. So that kind of explains why some of them lost it, but why then did some of the others retain it? Well, for those examples, it's not that tonic immobility gives them some kind of an advantage, it just doesn't do them any harm. Or at least it doesn't do them enough harm for it to be selected against so that they lost the trait. The scientists in this study refer to it as an evolutionary relic or evolutionary baggage. Once upon a time it served a purpose, but now it only persists in some shark species because it neither helps nor hinders them. It's just a weird little evolutionary quirk from millions of years ago. The best example I can give you that's kind of similar to this is in manta rays, where the oceanic mantas have a bump at the base of their tail, which is where their sting used to be millions of years ago before they evolved from their stingray ancestors. It's like a little morphological quirk that they've hung on to, a little nod to the past. And it's very similar to what's being suggested here with tonic immobility in sharks, a form of muscle memory from a very long time ago. I think reading this research paper did make me pause for a moment and reminded me that in nature, not every trait has to give an animal an adaptation. That is the case for the majority of the time, sure, but not every time. Sometimes a modern trait is just a little historical quirk, a glitch in the matrix. Speaking of glitches in the matrix and genetic quirks, that reminds me of one of the glitchiest white sharks to ever exist, and I tell you all about it here. This particular odd hybrid white shark managed to get itself lost and ended up over 7,000 miles from where it was supposed to be. It's a strange story, so make sure you give this video a click to find out more.